Hi, and welcome back to Hot Off the Press. I'm going to be your host, Jim Nettles, and tonight we're going to be talking about a couple of anthologies and some other new releases. But before we dive into all the fun, let's go around the room and see who all is here. So, Eric, if you'd go up first.
Yes, hi. My name is Eric Avedissian. I am a speculative fiction author from New Jersey. I got my start in writing from the journalism side. I was a newspaper reporter for many years. And then in 2020, I needed a career change. So I got my master's in writing. And now I am an adjunct professor teaching English at Atlantic Cape Community College in New Jersey. So that's my writing background, but I've always been attracted to writing. I have a few short stories out, and I'm going to tell you about a few of them tonight. So thanks for having me on.
Greg?
My name's Greg Frost. I publish as Gregory Frost. I'm a fantasist, which is to say I write across the genre spectrum. I never land in one place for long. Most recent books I have out are the Shadowbridge duology, and it's been quite a while since those came out, from Del Rey. Let's see, I have just sold a short story to Asimov's magazine, a collaboration, a posthumous collaboration with the writer Bill Johnson, mostly an analog writer, a terrific science fiction writer. Let's see, just sold a 3-book deal to Baen Books. The first one will be out next summer. It's called Rhymer. The series is based or derived from, I should say, a novella that I co-wrote with Jonathan Mayberry about 6 years ago called Tea Rhymer. I have, for 18 years, I taught fiction writing at Swarthmore College in Pennsylvania. I'm a Clarion graduate from way back in 1975. Yes, I'm that creaky. And I've been writing ever since.
Louise?
Hi, I'm Louise Piper. For many years, I was an English high school teacher, and I suppose that's where I got my grounding and my interest in the writing from. Spent many years teaching poetry, teaching short stories, how to write them, how to read them, etc. And then I'm just trying to think, it was probably about 5 years ago, I was asked by a psychic medium if I would write her life story for her. And it was a little bit of a curveball, but I thought, hey, why not? And so I did. And then on the back of that, I also wrote my own memoir, The Year I Lived with a Psychic. And yeah, just started writing and just had a change in career. I knew I couldn't do the writing and do the teaching full time in the way that I was doing. So I now do editing and writing, and I write all kinds, really. I would consider myself to be a poet, as well as a fiction and a non-fiction writer. And in fact, recently I was just shortlisted for the Rita Jo Poetry Prize. And I've just got my short story in the anthology we're going to be talking about tonight.
Heather?
Hi, I'm Heather McKinney. My background, let's see, I have a bachelor's in history, which is partly what drew me towards this anthology, submitting for it. Currently, I am working on my master's in creative writing from Regis University. I'm doing a dual genre of both fiction and creative nonfiction. This story that I submitted is actually my first published work, so that part is very new for me, although I have been writing since I was 11. I won't say how long that's been, but it's
Congratulations.
been a few years. Thank you. And yeah, that's really about it for me, but just really excited to be here.
Jenny?
Hi, I'm Gini Koch. I write the Alien Catherine Kitty Cat series for Dog Books. I also write under a variety of other names and in all lengths and all genres. Since we're sharing that past history, I I actually was a career marketing professional before I became a full-time author. So I know how to make it sizzle. And I can sell things you don't need to you at any time. So, but you need all of our books. So buy them. And I'm here to talk about a different anthology than anybody else.
And Chris.
I'm Chris A. Jackson, and I'm not here to talk about an anthology, but I spent about 20-ish years as a biologist in medical biology, and educated as a marine biologist, but I kind of wanted to eat. So I sold my soul to biomedicine and did about 20 years of that. But I've always been a gamer and a writer to a certain degree. Then my wife and I decided to quit our perfectly good jobs and go sailing for 13 years. And that gave me a lot of spare time, and I wrote a lot, and I got some great opportunities. I've written to date about 30 novels, and I don't know how many short stories. I stopped counting. And I've got 2 new novels coming out shortly, and an audio version of one of my best-selling novels coming out shortly. So I'm really excited to be here tonight. Thank you all.
Well, I appreciate everybody joining us to start stacking up that to-be-read pile. So the first anthology we're going to talk about is one we've actually had some of the authors on before, and it's Three Men Walk Into a. So, Eric, why don't you tell us a little bit about your submission for the anthology?
Okay. This is Three Time Travelers Walk Into. And
I don't remember the title yet.
Yes. Three Time Travelers Walk Into. And my submission is a short story called Never Meet Your Heroes. And it centers around a character named Nick, who is a con man and a thief from the future, who steals a time machine, a chrono jumper he wears on his wrist. And he wants to pull off the biggest heist, the best heist he could. And so he goes back in time and he gets 3 people that he admires who could do the job. He brings back John Dillinger, Jesse James, and Edward Teach, known to history as Blackbeard. So he thinks that he's going to make this big score with these 3. These are the 3 experts he has, and everything falls apart really quickly. Putting those kind of personalities together on a crew really doesn't work out for Nick, and hilarity and pain and violence ensue. So that's Never Meet Your Heroes.
I can't imagine with those 3 that any sort of mayhem would ensue. Greg?
Mayhem seems to be a theme that runs through this anthology, I want to say, as well as humor, by the way. So,
considering it was edited by Michael Ventrella,
well,
I would
exactly,
expect nothing less.
So because it was Michael, when he asked if I would submit a story to the anthology, I said yes immediately, because I had just done a story for his previous anthology, Across the Universe, the Beatles-themed anthology, where I'd done a mashup of the Beatles and the Marx Brothers. So I thought, sure, I can do this. 3 time travelers walk into a, no problem. And then for 6 months, couldn't come up with an idea for it at all, just like beating my head against a table. And then I had dinner one night at PhilCon with a fellow named David Axler, Hildy Silverman, who also is in this anthology, and Randy Dawn, who was Michael's co-editor on Across the Universe. And so over dinner, we're talking about that, and I explained to them, I have no idea what to do for a story. I'm just stuck, absolutely stuck, but I want to be in the anthology. And after many glasses of wine and conversation, in particular with Randy, I decided that I was going to write a story that involved Cary Grant, but I couldn't figure out what story I was going to use or what story I was going to create and who else would be in the story. And then by a weird coincidence, about 2 days later, because synchronicity seems to run the world, I ran across an article that talked about Cary Grant's 100th acid trip. Apparently, under doctor's care, he did 100 acid trips as therapy. And I went, okay, I'm going to write a story about Cary Grant's 100th acid trip and what happens there. And it turned into a story that's called Episode in Liminal State Technical Support, or Mr. Grant in the Bardo. And all I'll say is that it's Cary Grant, Ambrose Bierce, and Amelia Earhart. And beyond that, I'm not going to say anything.
Other than they took flight.
Other than they took, yeah, thank you. He'll be here all week, folks.
Louise, how about your contribution?
Okay, so my contribution and Three Time Travelers Walk Into is The Greatest Trick. And I have to say that I would not have really thought about time travel being my kind of thing. But when I saw the brief for this, and I think I was so influenced by my encounter with the psychic medium that in my mind, a time traveler was a spirit. And so that's how I first got the idea, thinking I could really do something for this anthology. And the first character came to me really, really easily, and that's Charles Baudelaire, the French poet. In fact, I've got his book here that features in my short story. And Charles Baudelaire was actually a spirit who turned up one day when I was working with the psychic medium. She was channeling Charles Baudelaire. And so that, for me, being a literature specialist and having taught lots of poetry for lots of years, was just like a real wow moment. And it lived with me. And so I already had the germs of wanting to do something with that in my mind. And then I knew that I needed to use Charles Baudelaire. And then from there, I think I was just influenced by, I do editing, copy editing. And I was copy editing a book that talked about some Canadian fraudsters. And so I decided that I was going to use a Canadian fraudster. So Cassie Chadwick features in my short story. And then I put those two characters together and realized that they were creating quite a bit of mayhem. And so then I realized that I was going to need a character that would just be quite sensible and calm things down and sort it all out. And so I used Martin Luther King. So in my mind, they're not time travelers, they're kind of spirits, but it has the same effect.
All right, Heather. For that first published work, what's your contribution?
So mine is Cornwallis' Gift. So in mine, it uses George Washington, Elizabeth Báthory, the Blood Countess, and Michael Jackson. Initially, I had Vlad the Impaler, but Michael contacted me. He said, "I like your idea, but I already have Dracula." So I substituted the Blood Countess. I figured she was a close second, So the idea is George Washington is finishing up, getting ready to go home after the Revolutionary War. And he's given this mysterious box as a gift from Cornwallis. And with the help of that box, he puts together a welcome home party that doesn't quite go the way he thinks it will.
All right, so Jenny, you're not time traveling. Well, maybe you are, but
I'm actually very jealous. It was a really cool call, and I didn't have the bandwidth to even try to get a story in. So kudos to all you guys, because it just sounds like a fabulous anthology. Part of why I didn't have that bandwidth, got to be in Predator, Eyes of the Demon. And this will shock everybody. They're all Predator stories based on the movies or the games or whatever. So I know, that's a total spoiler for everyone. My story in this is cannon fodder, where my protagonist discovers that they're being sent to a world that's actually been set up for the predators, for the Aqua, to come and hunt. And so they're being betrayed by their owner, government, and everything else. And and the usual death, blood, mayhem, and violent, visceral action ensues. Managed to get a little bit of humor in there, not a lot because it's Predator, so you only get a couple of joke lines. But it was really fun to do. I used female Predators as well as a team of all women except for the sergeant, and that was really fun to do too. As you know, you murder everybody, get attached, and then watch them die. But it was really fun. It was really great to get the opportunity to write in something as big a deal as Predator. So I was very excited to be a part of it.
Chris?
Okay, so I'm the odd one out. I'm not in any anthologies right now that are coming out soon, but I do have 2 novel releases within the next few weeks. One is on pre-order already from Falstaff, and that's kind of the one I'm most excited about because it's the first in a series. And it's been a series that I've been trying to get off the ground in a long time, and John was gracious enough to take it on. And the reason it had difficulty taking off, as often happens with me, is it's kind of between genres. Okay, so the title of the book is The Last, and the title of the series is The War of Souls. And here's the elevator pitch. It is a post-apocalyptic angel fantasy. Okay, so the impetus for this novel came when I was kind of going through a difficult shot of emotional, energy, and I wanted to blame somebody for the state of the world. Who better to blame than hell, right? So there are devils living among us, and I did a little research, so who better than the Nephilim, who are the offspring of the angels who were cast out of hell. And I did this whole kind of biblical thing. So heaven wouldn't let that stand. So they put the get of angels on earth too. And so there's been a war going on for 5,000 years on earth that nobody knows about except for the Nephilim, the bad guys, and the ageless, the offspring of the angels. And the problem with that war is hell cheats, right? Which you'd expect. You'd think God would expect that too, right? So anyway,
is there any such thing as a fair war?
Exactly, right? So the story begins in the near future, 2072, and the woman who is 5,000 years old and has all the PTSD associated with that. She thinks she is the very last of the ageless, and the war against hell is nearly lost. But she finds some allies and a potential weapon, and hijinks ensue. It's a little grim because the future is a slow motion climate apocalypse, and police state all over North America. When the sea level rises 50 meters, all the coastal cities are inundated. But I got to do a lot of fun stuff with Google Earth, looking at Manhattan and how much of Manhattan would be above water and stuff like that. So it was a lot of fun. And John loved the book, and I even got a little bit of an interest from making a screenplay for it. So cross fingers on that.
And I'll point out that you both lived on a boat and now you live on a mountaintop. So either way, you were fine.
That's not prescient in any way, shape, or form. I'm not like fleeing the ocean, right? But so that one's on pre-order now from Amazon. Just look for The Last from Falstaff Books, The War of Souls trilogy. The other one that's coming out is the third in a series from Shadow Alley Press, which is a big publisher of lit RPG, but they're also breaking into hard science fiction with a universe created by one of their developers, DJ Bowden. It's called the Fivefold Universe, and I'm on my third book in that series. And the first two have done well, and we're wrapping up the series with the third book. And this has really been a chance for me to really stretch my legs into hard science fiction with somebody else doing the heavy lifting, the world building stuff, you know. DJ's brilliant. He's really into physics, and he's a former military too, so I bend his ear as far as that's concerned. But it's almost space opera, but not really any weird elements like the Force. It's all technology. It's about a guy who has a neat little robot assistant, hot girlfriend trying to solve alien mysteries all throughout the galaxy. And it's just too much fun. And the third project that's coming out is an audiobook of a book that I've had out for more than a decade. The Weapon of Flesh series, my Magical Assassin series, is high fantasy. And I finally found the right audiobook narrator for that. I'm so excited. His name is Ryan Reed. He's a rising star. He's really brilliant. And he's, I mean, if you, I will pimp this to all of you. He's fantastic. And if you need an audiobook narrator, Ryan Reed is just brilliant. He is, I have highest kudos for him. And his voices, he switches voices so fast that, I mean, I had a Zoom interview with him, and he was, how about this? How about this? How about this? How about this? Just changing accents in mid-sentence. And I was like, how do you do that? You know? So I'm so excited for that. That'll be out for Gen Con too. In fact, all three of these books will be out for Gen Con and in Indianapolis. In case you've never been, you should go. It's a gamer's paradise. It's a wonderful place. So that's it. That's all I've got for now.
So let's talk a little bit about character, because I mean, as we look at the couple of anthologies and the stories here, these are all very rich areas for character. Now, because I want to keep the anthologies together, we're going to bounce around a little bit more than I usually would, or a little differently. So, Jenny, how did you decide to come and craft your flavor of Predator? How do you make their personalities work, their characters? You know, because it's a little bit different from what we've seen a lot of.
Yes and no. I come at a lot of things with, I don't write weak women well. So I don't really write weak women characters well. So it's easy for me to come up with a group of strong female characters because that's what I'm used to writing. And by strong, I don't mean, that they can necessarily knock a man down, though Tank certainly can. But that they aren't going to be bowled over. My L Squad, aka Loser Squad, they're on the Brig, which is a orbital marine. It's the orbital marine jail basically, and they get sent there, and they're sent out for all the crap jobs, right? If there's something icky, you get to you're going to go out there. And so L Squad is literally being sent on this mission to be cannon fodder, only because their Sarge has trained them to work as a unit. They actually do, which is why they survive longer than H Squad, which, are the good guys, right? Except they're wiped out, spoiler, fast. Because Predators do. On the other side, I have 3 female Predators who, in their clan, it's their third tribe. They've all failed miserably on their hunts, and this is their last opportunity for a good hunt and good honor. And they too are under the direction of a male Predator. So it's women being led by men, but the women still have to make choices on their own without asking, the guy in charge what to do. And it's how Lavindi, who is the female Predator, and Callie, who is my POV human, what happens to them in this particular experience that changes both of them forever. And whether or not they survive falls along on getting changed forever. So I just kind of approached it as this is what I want to do. I want to do a female versus female group fighting. I really wanted to we got permission to use female Predators. And it was just fun. It was just, how do you take this squad that they work together, even though they've been sent to the brig for life? How are they going to outwit, outthink, and outmaneuver creatures whose hunting is like everything for them? And it was really fun. One of the nice things is there's so much Predator lore that there's a lot of available. There's wikis and there's this and there's that. And our editor was very focused on making sure to try to help us avoid pitfalls. It's like the third or fourth Predator-based anthology he's done, so he's really familiar with it. So it was just, ran it through him. He liked the idea, and I just kind of rolled with it. But again, I wanted two strong sets of female characters going at it together against each other.
So, Chris, you are playing with one of the favorite topics we see a lot of in urban fantasy. Angels, demons, the war in heaven and hell, and the war for the earth. And of course, one of my favorites, are Nephilim characters, because you get that combination. So how did you approach your own particular flavor for these entities?
So first, I want to say I'm not religious. I'm agnostic. So I approach this kind of as, here's a fantasy world I want to create, and here are the tools I want to use to create this fantasy world. So the Nephilim inhabit a human body and supplant the soul that was originally in that human body, and live a normal life. They age normally. They can be injured. They can even be killed. But the instant they're killed, the hate of hell casts them back to Earth into a new body. So they basically respawn. Doctor Who reference, right? The problem is with this war is the ageless, the offspring of the seraphim, the angels from heaven, the good guys. When they die, and they're just as mortal as you or I, although they have some special powers depending on what angel they are the offspring from. And my protagonist is the offspring of the angel of healing, Israfel. So she can absorb injuries, mental trauma, things from people, and then heal them herself. But when they're killed, and a 45 to the head will definitely do the job, God's love takes them off to heaven. So over 5,000 years, the number of ageless has diminished constantly, whereas there's still 200 Nephilim out there. And the era of technology has been the death knell, literally, for the ageless, because tracking, doxing, once your identity gets out there, your picture, facial recognition software, aerial drones with software, satellite imagery, you name it. Every Nephilim has worked for millennia to assimilate knowledge that puts them into positions of power as they spawn into a new life. So they know everything they've known in previous lives. So they are pretty powerful, and they basically run Earth. And so you have this one woman who thinks it's all over. And when she dies, the four horsemen come and hell wins. So all she's doing is surviving from now. But then she discovers hope, which is a powerful thing.
A cheerful light read.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's a, I've read this book and edited this book. It was with an agent in New York for quite a while, but he couldn't place it. He loved it, but he couldn't place it. It's one of those between genre books, right? It's just hard to market. He loved what I did in New York. He's a New Yorker, and I played around with, Google Earth is your friend, and you can get down and know what the buildings are on any given street, get it down to, it's just such fun. It's a huge rabbit hole to get into. But when I get into New York and they're in a firefight going through flooded New York, I describe the building types that they're having to run through and things like that. So it's a lot of fun. And
So-
yes, there's gunfire too, a little bit.
So, Eric, as I lose my voice, when you looked at your character, sorry, when you looked at your characters that you selected for your story, how did you decide who to pull and how to give them your take on their personalities?
Okay. Well, when I pitched the story originally as Bill and Ted meets Money Heist meets Leverage, and pretty much like I wanted to pick these three characters. I was trying to figure out who I did know that Dillinger would be in it because he was, public enemy number one during the Great Depression, a bank robber, an outlaw. And I wanted to pick out someone else from, a different era. So the 19th century, cowboy, so bank robber. So Jesse James was a natural choice. And then I thought I wanted to go back in time. Well, who else could it be? Who else was, who else had the criminal background? Who else was fun that people would know? And a pirate, Blackbeard. So Nick basically his companion in the book tells him, "Oh, so basically you're just playing robber, cowboy, and pirate. So you're just a grown boy. That's pretty much what it is. But you're actually having these three notorious figures, and you're going on a heist with them." It included a lot of research on who these people were. Like I had to get certain details right. John Dillinger's mustache, John Dillinger's demeanor, Jesse James' crystal blue eyes. I wanted to put that in there somehow. And I also wanted to put the different patois and how they talked. Because you got three different kinds. You got the Dillinger had his, Depression era 1930s speak, his slang. You had the Old West slang with Jesse James, and you had the pirate slang with Blackbeard. So they're all talking back and forth in their own dialogues with their own personalities. And the problem with the story is, as you find out, a little spoiler, is that Nick likes these characters because he venerates these, the bad boys. These are the bad boys, and this veneration of the criminal. This veneration in America where we praise like the outlaws, the rebels, the mavericks. And when you're actually working with them, these three infamous people, it turns out that they ambush him and it's not fun. So, he bites off more than he can chew with that. And they end up sabotaging his plans and his heist. So, never meet your heroes is the title of the story. And yeah, he never should have met his heroes. So, yeah.
Or pick better heroes.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, Greg, go ahead. I'm sorry. Oh. So, Greg, how about you? How did you pick your three? How did you craft them, create them, and make them your own?
Well, Cary Grant was easy to craft. All I had to do was watch a few Cary Grant movies. But once I had settled on him as my sort of central character in the story, then it became, it sort of set itself up. It's three people who've fallen off their timeline. And his is a case of mistaken identity. He's misidentified as somebody else. So he has to prove that he's really him as opposed to who the liminal technical support person thinks he is. But the other two people are people who just fell off their timeline. So Ambrose Bierce was a perfect choice because he was supposed to go someplace and he didn't get there, and nobody knows what happened to him. He simply vanished. And everybody knows Amelia Earhart's story, same thing. Never arrived where you were supposed to be. Nobody ever really found you. So they just seemed like logical people to work with. And they were people that Cary Grant would have been familiar with one way or another. So that sort of fell together once I had this idea of people falling off their timeline and him being misidentified, which is fairly screwball comedy. And I kind of wanted to write a screwball comedy story. So that's the direction I took it. And I think it plays well. And you mentioned, Chris, that you're in New York. Are you in? You're not in New York now, right?
No. I visited, but Google Earth is your friend, right?
That's right. So I'm reading next week in New York at the KGB bar, and that's the story I'll be reading at the KGB. So anybody wants to come and listen to the live reading at the KGB bar, I'll see you there.
In the film casting, I hope you made the doctor giving the dosing Bob Hope.
Absolutely.
So Louise, how about you? I mean, you talked a little bit, but how did you really go about crafting your selection of characters to make them your own?
Okay, so I think that as I mentioned, Charles Baudelaire was the easiest one for me, because I'd had this experience where a psychic medium had channeled him. And so literally I had dinner with Charles Baudelaire. And so I kind of knew the kind of things that he would talk about, and the way that he would talk. So he was the easier one for me. And as well, because I knew his poetry as well. So I kind of felt I knew him to begin with. And I was able to give him quite a distinct voice as well, because with him being French, I was able to incorporate that into the writing as well. So I was able to give him that sort of French voice. So yeah, he was by far the easiest one for me to do. And then I suppose in some respects, Cassie Chadwick was quite easy because she's not really that well known. Although she's a Canadian fraudster, and she is in the history books, she's not really that well known. And so I had a little bit of free license with her. So yeah, in fact, I molded her to help me to flip, to sort of develop the plot a little bit, really. I used her in that way. And then I think the more challenging one for me was Dr. King, Martin Luther King, because he is so well known. And so I thought what I needed to do there is I looked at some of his more famous quotes, didn't go for the really, really obvious one, but I actually put some of his own words into his own mouth, just so that it kind of felt authentic to me.
So Heather, how about you? How did you approach pulling in and making your characters your own?
Well, for me, I started with George Washington. The reason I picked him, I credit my love of writing and reading on three things. I'm an only child, so I had to entertain myself a lot. I was a sick kid, so I was home all the time. And plus I was part of like a weird fringy religion. So I was fairly isolated. It was really just church people and family. I wasn't homeschooled, but I wasn't allowed to like do extracurriculars and things like that. So, when other people were going to dances and doing normal things, I was home reading books, and sometimes for fun, I dressed up like people from history, like all the cool kids. So that's what I did sometimes. So one of my favorite eras was the American Revolution. And so for me, that was easy to pick him because I knew a lot about him, the type of leader he was, kind of the style of the day, the powdered wigs, the knee breeches, the whole 9 yards, so that was kind of, for me, easier setting to, figure out, and him as the main character. And then I thought, I really want this to be weird. I want it to be random. I don't want it to go together, and I was a big fan of Michael Jackson, and I grew up during the, Thriller years, all of that. So I even had a Thriller jacket. So I was like, he's a good one, and if you could imagine he and Washington meeting, it would be shocking, for Washington and his culture. And then I thought, you need something gruesome, like any good fairy tale, So that's where the Blood Countess came in. So again, something to shock the sensibility of, the 18th century new colony turned country. So that's kind of how it came about.
I gotta say, Heather, I so want to read the interaction between Michael Jackson and George Washington. That just sounds just the coolest thing ever. So yeah, I want to read that.
I want to see Michael Jackson in a powdered wig. But so since we're talking a lot here about anthologies, and you kind of have, we've covered a lot of ground, and Chris, you've even written for a fair number of anthologies. For anybody who's never done this or thinking about trying to get into an anthology or something along these lines, what's it like to kind of be given these prompts, work with them, work within the constraints of them? Because it's very different. 3 Time Travelers Walk into a Bar is an open prompt. The Aliens, you're working in an established universe, an established IP. You've got a framework to work in. So, Chris, from your anthology work and the things that you've done, what's it like for you doing anthologies? Because it's also shorter stuff versus, 8,000 pages for, a sea shanty.
How do I approach it?
Mm-hmm.
I unlike most writers, I started out writing long form. I started out writing novels. My whole theory on novels versus short fiction is short fiction is rather like painting a portrait. Every brushstroke has to be absolutely perfect. Writing a novel is like painting a house. You put the paint on and you step back and it looks good from a distance. Not that every sentence doesn't have to matter and you have to get it right, but it's just that kind of attention to detail difference. I actually like working with prompts, and I had a lot of actual non-intentional training in that regard. I belonged to a really great writers group, and we had monthly projects. This writers group has since disbanded, but it was called the Herscher Project, and it was a bunch of people from all over the world, and we had monthly projects, and it could be just something as obtuse as write something erotica, anything. Just to take you outside of your own little safe space, here, try something different. But a lot of those were just strict prompts. One of the really fun ones was the organizer wrote the first paragraph that was very ambiguous, whether this was a fantasy or science fiction or contemporary. And then everybody took that paragraph and then went with it and wrote the rest of the story. And in whatever genre they wanted. So I have no problem with somebody saying, I want you to write a takeoff on spaceships and aliens and Bigfoot and rock stars. I can do that. In fact, one time my sister is an educator and she works in Oregon, and I got to do a short story for a class. It was a mashup. I took ideas from whoever wanted to raise their hand in class, and these are 13, 14-year-olds. So it involved Bigfoot, aliens, science fiction. I can't remember which rock star it was. And so I had to take all of their ideas and write a short story. And it was just so fun. And I wrote it and then I gave it back to them and said, here's your short story. And they had a lot of fun with it. But yeah, I've never had any problem with just taking the ball and running with it. You hand me anything and I can write a story on it. So, but I've also run into anthologies where basically, I knew what I wanted to write for that anthology the moment the title came out. The one I wrote for was Women in Practical Armor, that was edited by a brilliant young editor I know, Gabrielle Harbaway, who edited for me for one of my small press anthology or series. But she wanted to write about real women warriors, and I had a secondary character for a series of books that I wrote, that I so wanted to write her origin story, and that was just, it was already in my head. I already had it. So yeah, story's already written. All I got to do is get down and type it in.
So Eric, whether it's for our Three Time Travelers anthology or other things you've done, what is it for you working for anthologies? Do you enjoy them? How many have you done? What's it like for somebody that hasn't necessarily done it or wants to get into it?
How many have I done? I've done about, at the end of this year, it will be 7. I sold my 10th short story this year to an anthology that's coming out in September. So they are fun. And working with prompts are very challenging, because you get to explore different ideas that resonate with you personally, and you can tell a really good story with them, to try to make it work. The story. Can we talk about anthologies that we're doing or have done? Or
sure.
Okay. All right. So we know the Three Time Travelers one. Have one that came out last month called Panthology. If you can see it, Panthology. It's about Peter Pan. 7 novella-length stories about Neverland. There are different takes on Neverland. There are different takes on Peter Pan. And my story was more of a grittier version of Neverland. Like the premise is the modern world bleeds into Neverland and kind of corrupts it. And Peter Pan grows older, but he doesn't grow up. So he's pretty much an incel with his own podcast. And, kind of like a Joe Rogan figure, he gets celebrity that way. So I had fun exploring that. That's from Shadow Spark Publishing. And the anthology coming out in September is from Lost Boys Press. That's called Great Wars. And my story is Make Lovecraft Not War, where a young H.P. Lovecraft goes off into the trenches of World War I and experiences the horrors, literal horrors, eldritch horrors and cosmic horror that the war created. So it's kind of like jamming different ideas and genres together, mashing them up, and doing something different and exploring something different. That's why I like writing short stories, is to explore different things that, I find interesting. So.
How about you, Greg?
Well, I've been in lots of anthologies. I did a number of adult fairy tale anthologies, and for that matter, YA and middle grade anthologies for Terry Windling and Ellen Datlow when they were co-editing a lot of books. And I've written a number of stories for Ellen Datlow's more or less horror or supernatural anthologies, including Supernatural Noir, which is a mashup of noir fiction and supernatural fiction. But Chris mentioned, you said prompts, and that's a great word for all of this, because I was thinking about what you were saying, and in my time teaching fiction writing, I find that if you say to the students, just go off and write, you'll get at least half the class will be just blank, because you haven't, you've said you can write anything you want, go write. And they don't function very well with that. But if you say, I want you to go write a story that's half of a phone call, and you have to guess at what the rest of the phone call, the other end of the phone call is about, bang, now they're focused on something and it's easy to write. So in a lot of ways, I think writing for an anthology is kind of like that. It's like you're you're taking away a lot of possibilities, and you're forcing the writer to focus on a certain set of possibilities. And once you do that, suddenly ideas start manifesting because you've limited them in some way. And I think that's true with writing prompts in general. It's interesting to throw something at people that limits their, what they can do in a story and see what they come up with. And frequently, I think you come up with more interesting material.
Yeah, and in fact, one of my favorite exercises, since you're talking about that with writing prompts, is and we do this a lot of the time at conventions, where it's, you call out to the audience, and it's, give me a scene, give me a setup, give me a conflict, and you get to go, and you've got 5 minutes to crank out a complete short story. Right. Those are great exercises. They're a tremendous amount of fun. So, Louise, how about you?
Yeah.
How's your anthology experience going?
Okay, well, so this is the first time I've been published in an anthology, but I just want to build on what Greg was saying there. I agree so much that, because I love a prompt, because I write poetry as well, and prompts for me, for poetry, I do a lot of those, and they're really, really useful. And I'm always very mindful. I think Margaret Atwood, she talks about the terror of the blank page, and I think sometimes as a writer, it's like you just don't know what direction you're going to go in, because there's so many possibilities. And for me, I write poetry, fiction, and non-fiction, so it's just like all buzzing away. But if you give me a prompt and you give me that focus, and I'll also pick up, I think it was Eric used the word resonate. Something just resonates, and it's not just that it gives you a focus. I think something goes deep down inside, and you kind of think yes, and that's what wants to come out. So I really like the prompt. The other thing that I would say about anthologies, because I think that the guy who had the most interesting job here was Michael Ventrella as the editor, because of course the interesting thing with an anthology is that they've all got to work together. All of those stories have to somehow work together. And so for me, that, I would be so excited to edit an anthology if anybody's listening.
Be careful what you ask for. That's all I'm going to tell you about that experience. Be careful what you ask for. Heather, so since this is not only your first anthology, your first published work, how does it feel for you? What's it like writing for an anthology, getting into an anthology?
Oh, it's amazing. This is I'm hoping the first step in a long journey for me. So that's what I hope. And I love writing prompts. I always have, and I like them just because it has the power to help you create a story that you wouldn't have come up with on your own. Probably takes you in a new direction, sparks. When I read this, it was actually my wife that pointed the call for submissions out to me. She's like, "This is right up your alley. It's history nerd, Mm-hmm. So I was like, yeah. And so I just sat down and just, started coming up with some ideas and forming the story. And, it was really exciting because I would have never come up with this on my own. So that was really cool. And then I've had some opportunities. I ran a workshop here a couple months ago with a group of middle schoolers at my son's school. And what I did there was I said, now you tell me, what's the character look like? What color eyes do they have? What color hair do they have? What do they like to do? Who's the bad guy in the story, and that kind of stuff. And I said, when you hand me all this, I'm going to make up a story and tell you. And so they give me all these details, and then I make up, this little story to tell them. And they're like, it really goes over well with them because it's like, wow, and then I'm like, all right, next time we meet, I'm going to give you a prompt, and now you can use some of the details and things that we've come up with maybe to help build out your own story next time. So, it's catching.
So Jenny, since this particular anthology is in that licensed property space.
It is, but I'm going to answer all the questions real quick. I'm actually a natural novelist, but my first professional sale was into a short story, into an anthology. And the panel I'm managing at San Diego Comic-Con next week is breaking in via anthologies. And for the latest anthology I'm writing for, I literally wrote the story Chris described at the start. It's science fiction with Bigfoot and aliens. And aliens, I'm like, I know mine doesn't sound anything like his. And that's one of the things on prompts and why you can do that and why it's so great is because guaranteed, I really doubt, other than Heather trying for Dracula and having to do the Blood Queen, I doubt Michael got a lot of triple crosses. It's like, it's really unlikely that anyone else picked the same three people each other off and did, which is part of the thrill on that. And I find I really like prompts. With Predator, not aliens. You keep saying aliens, but it's Predator. I mean, they are aliens, but it's Predator.
Hey, look, cold drugs.
I
Just
I'm
accept
not an
the
AVP.
fact that I'm still
not
functional.
in an AVP. I want to be in an AVP, but I'm not yet. So, in Predator, I was also in an X-Files anthology, and both of those were in the work for hire space, where you have a very big. Both of these have huge lore and huge amounts of information on them, and both of them gave you tremendous freedom to choose your own story, which is okay if you had the right idea. Now, fortunately, when I did X-Files, I absolutely knew the story I wanted to tell for sure. And in Predator, I really wanted to do what I did and was allowed to, so that was great. But UFO, Unidentified Funny Objects 9 is where I've written the story that I clearly, psychically got from Chris. And I was struggling. I had no idea what to do. The editor did not want anything in series, and he wanted, I wanted standalone, I wanted this, I wanted that, and I'm like, help. He's like, you're funny, you'll be fine. So I brainstormed with my family, and a friend of mine is staying with us for a couple of months, and she's like, do something with Bigfoot. I'm like, he doesn't want paranormal. And she says, there's a way you can make them an alien. We were channeling Chris, okay? And then there could be a fight and all this other stuff. So, I mean, it actually worked out. And he loves it. I'm happy to say I had that confirmed today. But I really like prompts. In fact, to the point where when I am invited into, I was trying to count, but I was too interested listening to what everybody else was saying to actually get it. But I think I'm in at least 40 anthologies in the various pen names. Yeah, a lot. For someone who's a natural novelist and for who writing short is really hard. So they pay me, and so I show up. But I find myself, when it's too open a call, a lot of times I'll bebop over to the editor and go, so what open to see? And a lot of times that works, and sometimes what they come back with just makes you go, oh, and I asked you what you wanted, and you just told me, so now I have to do it. Maybe I shouldn't have asked, but it's always worked out. But a lot of times when you ask for specifics that are more narrow than the prompt, you can get something that you were not prepared for. So now I'm a little more, maybe I'll come up with something on my own. Yeah, because that one just threw me. I did it, and I did it really well, and I'm not naming it because I really like the editors and wish to work with them again, and I really love the story I came up with, but I was not prepared. So sometimes a little more wider thing is great, but I've got to tell you, I don't think I could have done either the X-Files story or the Predator story in particular earlier in my career. because I had to come up with something that not only was a good story, but would fit within all the lore. And the people that are reading Predator or X-Files or Aliens or anything, they are looking for stories that fit their expectations. You get to challenge them a little, but you cannot, if it's not a bloodbath in Predator, they don't know why you showed up. Okay? So, but you still have to come up with your own idea for that. I couldn't say, so what do you want? What I could do was say, can I use female predators? Can I do an all-female group? Is this okay? And once that was said, oh yeah, that's fine, then I could roll with what I wanted to do. But it's, if I have my druthers, it's the greatest to be invited in. There's nothing better than someone saying, you're an anchor author, nothing better. And I'd like a reasonably specific prompt, but I can do it with, here's my story, I wasn't invited in, and hey, it's a white prompt.
Well, and I think the thing that everybody can kind of take away from this is, one of the things that comes up a lot of the time is, hey, I've got a great idea for a story. The number of times that I've stood in the front of a room and I said, here's a book that I'm working on. Here is the general story for that. And it was like, aren't you afraid somebody's going to copy that? No, because the way that I'm going to do the story, no one else, you may have some of the same elements, same ideas, the way I'm going to execute on it is going to be my way. And I mean, I
guarantee my story and Chris's story will sound nothing alike.
Totally different. Yeah.
Absolutely true. I'm sure.
Yeah.
And, so this is the thing that I hope everybody takes away is you can have the same idea and write the same story 12 different ways with 12 different sets of characters, 12 different endings, and kill them all over and over and over again if you're Jenny. So I want to thank everybody for joining tonight, and we've given you a fair amount of stuff to add to that to be read pile. But before we get out of here, I want to make sure everybody knows where to come and find you guys, website, social media, anything else you guys want to promote before we get out of here. So Chris, because there's no adults in the room, I'm going to go backwards.
So you can find me on my website, Jack's Books. It's JX Books. All my work is available there. We have links. We have cool little magical click to read buttons that give you free samples of our work. I say our because my wife and I have been partners in crime for way too many years. Not too many years, but a lot of years. And you can find me on Twitter, Chris A. Jackson 1, the numeral 1. And you can find me on Facebook, Chris A. Jackson. Don't forget the A, otherwise you get a bunch of other people, because Chris Jackson is just very, very common, whereas I am not.
Jenny?
GiniKoch.com is my website. I'm on Twitter at Gini Koch. I'm on Facebook far too much. Gini Koch, author, Hairspray and Rock and Roll, author of the Cave and Catherine Kitty Cat series. You have to claim them when they pop up. And I'm on Pinterest a lot. I'm not on Instagram, even though it looks like I am. I'm going to be, as I mentioned, at San Diego Comic-Con doing that Breaking and Being Anthologies panel, should anybody listening be attending. I will also be at Gen Con because Maurice Brodas and Chris A. Jackson told me to go. So I am. And I will be at Dragon Con, and I will be at World Fantasy Con in NOLA, baby, and I'm sure I'm not going just because of the city. And,
wait, it's in New Orleans? Wow.
Yes. And other than the wonderful Predator, Eyes of the Demon, I have several other anthologies that are coming up. And yes, I swear to you, Aliens Like Us, book 17 is coming.
Heather.
Oh, right now, just Facebook under Heather McKinney. Author's page TBD.
Louise?
I'm Louise Piper. I'm available on Facebook. I've got an author page there. I'm also available on Instagram, louise.piper. And I've also got my books available on Amazon.
Greg?
My website's gregoryfrost.com. I'm on Twitter as Gregory_Frost. I'm also a Bookview Cafe author, which is an authors cooperative that's online. And I have a collection of stories that was originally published by Golden Griffin, I guess around 2000, that's coming out, returning to print and ebook next month from Bookview Cafe. And you can find them online at bookviewcafe.com.
And Eric?
Yeah, you can cyberstalk me on my website, ericavedissian.com. I am on Twitter. My handle is @angryreporter, and I'm on Facebook. And promotions, my debut novel comes out December 12th, 2022, A Cursed Sun, from Shadow Spark Publishing, and my short story in the Great Wars anthology comes out in September 22nd, I believe. So thank you.
Well, I think everybody's got plenty of stuff to add to that to be read pile. I have had the pleasure of being your host tonight, Jim Nettles. You can find me at jamespnettles.com, authoressentials.net. You can find some of the workshops at the speculative-fiction-academy.com. And of course, here at ConTinual. And we will see everybody again soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks a lot.